I'm delighted to now have with me JJ Devaney. JJ is a familiar voice to soccer fanatics across the globe, hosting the Caught Offside podcast. He is also a champion of grassroots soccer, being involved with SC Yoa since 2015 and helping relaunch Yoa's men's team in the CSL. JJ, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here in the Yoa club as well. It's so cool.
With all these flags, I was like a boy in a hobby shop seeing all these trophies that we've got as well.
Yeah, and it makes me sad that I haven't added to the collection at all since I've been with the club. But you know, tremendous history here, and when you walk into a place like this, the notion that soccer hasn't arrived in America makes it seems so silly because it's been here since the 20s.
So the first question I wanted to ask is, when did your love affair start with soccer, and what's your earliest memories of it?
My love affair with soccer started, like a lot of kids, I suppose, Italian 90, people of my age. I grew up in a house in Ireland which was Gaelic football orientated. My uncles were the soccer people. Gaelic football was the main thing. And then Ireland qualified for the World Cup in 1990 and everything changed. It just got sucked in, went on a run to the World Cup quarter-final, and I was obsessed. And it's my first love, and it'll be my last love too.
When did you start interacting with American soccer? Because I know you mentioned to me you came over and coached a bit. And
yeah. So I came out here in 2008. I'd been very curious to see the country, and I didn't want to come and do the tourist thing. I wanted to come out and work and see what it's like. And I thought coaching soccer, great opportunity. So I was based in New Jersey. We coached up and down the Eastern Seaboard, and I kind of got a great feel for American soccer and how a different perspective. I did not think it would be so well organized. I didn't think it would be so competitive. I didn't think people would be obsessed as much as they are, and they really are. Because the perception, as you know, back home is that soccer is some kind of weird thing for the Yanks, and they don't get it, but they do get it, very much so.
And you moved permanently to America in 2013, writing for the Irish World's newspaper. In your first, you were in your first 2 years. Were you playing soccer, and how did you discover Yoa in 2015?
Well, when I got out, I was looking for a club, and I played a few games with, I think, Lansdowne Boys reserves, just to, I think maybe only one game, to be truthful. But just because I wanted to play, I wanted to keep going, and you play pickup games and things like that. But I have friends, Tony Conahan, Greg Bergstrom. They got me involved in Yoa. And I had no idea about it. I had no idea there was a clubhouse. I had no idea of the history. I had no idea that players from this club won. Mike Windishman captained the US team at Italia 90. I had no idea about Amir Ali, who was just a Herman Trophy winner, and a guy who played for the national team at youth levels and then played on the Olympic team. Didn't know any of it. So that's how I kind of got sucked into Yoa, and I started playing with them. And I wouldn't want to play for anyone else. My friends are here. I love the club. I love the vibe of the place. And yeah, that's really how it happened. I got sucked into this historical club, really.
And obviously, it's the oldest soccer club in New York, founded in 1911. Besides the memorabilia and the trophies, do you feel like that history still has like almost a clear path to the Yoa that exists today?
I think so. I know we're going to talk about it a little bit, but there's been a kind of a rejuvenation of that as well. But yeah, no, I do. I really do. And I think when you come in here, it's kind of imbued. The walls are imbued with history. You can't. But I even look at some of the pictures, and I see people that I know at the youth level playing. I see Sean Conahan. I see Greg. I see Jan Midbo. I see all these people that I know now, and it's very much part of the community. It's part of the soccer culture in New York. People know who Yoa is. They know their rivalries, maybe with Eintracht going back through the years. They just know their place in New York soccer. And there's a direct line through. It's important to keep it going. And for a while, maybe it was beginning to fail, but I think we're rejuvenating it somewhat.
So talking about the rejuvenation, when did the conversation start to begin that you wanted to put men's teams back into the CSL?
Well, I talked to Greg, and I talked to a couple of people about, like, why do we only have an over 35s team at the time? Like, what's happened? And, the other teams, we kind of aged up there, and there was no one to coach the other teams, or there wasn't that much interest. And I was living in Bay Ridge at the time, and I thought, like, there's so many kids from all sorts of different backgrounds, all with soccer culture, and there isn't a team based in Bay Ridge that could have a first team that could play in Division 1 or Division 2. It didn't make sense to me. But I didn't do anything about it. I didn't have the time. I was only getting settled in the country. And then I met a guy called Rob Rossicone, who is just Johnny Enthusiasm. And he did something amazing because he was very au fait with the American soccer culture. He understood that it was pay to play, and he didn't like that. And I would be on board with that. And I saw that he started SV Yellowhook in 2021, and I thought, this is brilliant. So like December 2021, I'm seeing all these Instagram posts about training and tryouts, and I said, I would love to just go and train with these guys, go and play with them. And so all that winter of 22, just last year, we trained together. There was never less than maybe like 30 guys out. It was incredible. Now you have to cut the wheat from the chaff eventually, but he started entering SV Yellowhook Bay Ridge-based teams into the Cosmopolitan Soccer League. And then it became just obvious. There's Yoa here with all its history and all its trophies and all its, I suppose the gravitas of the name of the club. And Rob really wanted to put those two things together. And now Yoa have a team in the CSL proper, which is amazing, and an opportunity to play in that league if you live in this area.
What was the hardest thing about starting up an amateur club? And what's been the most rewarding part of it as well?
I think the most rewarding part of it is the new people that you meet, and you begin to realize that you're 20 years older than some of them, and you can still tackle them and run with them. So that gives you, selfishly, that makes you feel good about yourself. But the best thing is meeting new people and giving them the opportunity. There were so many kids who were just delighted to come and train, delighted to have kit and gear and feel like professionals, like to live that dream. The idea that they couldn't do that in their area wasn't great, and that was the best part about it. I know a kid, Jesus, who was like he just loved it. Every day he was there with a smile on his face and loved playing for the team. The difficult part about it is, like anything, how do you balance having guys who love the game and having a competitive team, a team that's not going to get walloped on the field, and so you're trying to tread that line. I must say that I was there. If anyone asked me what I was there for, I would have said morale, because Rob did so much of the heavy lifting, so much of the work, so much of the turning up to training, so much of the exasperation with guys, trying to get guys to, come on, you got to commit, you're good enough, do this, do that. So I give a lot of credit to Rob. But it's the teething, it's the growing pains of starting a new thing, and hopefully in a few years it'll be much smoother.
I mean, honestly, I think you guys have made an amazing start, for about a year now.
Yes.
I mean, and even Yellowhook, I remember seeing you guys, I think, had a friendly, it must have been February, March of last year.
It was.
And and like you mentioned, you had so many people then. And
it was freezing.
It's absolutely freezing. Yeah, you don't need to tell me. I was staying there still for 2 hours. Yeah. But, I think seeing week in, week out, the managers across CSL do an amazing job because it's really hard to get players to show up. But I think you guys kind of made it look annoyingly easy getting the turnout, honestly.
It was great to see the enthusiasm for the game, definitely. And Rob has a mind for we had a snazzy kit.
Yes, more than one. Then
one
two,
kit.
then three, then four, then five.
It was Hummel gear, and it all looked good. And let's be honest, the things that draw you to the game maybe the first time might be, oh, that's a really nice football. Look at that guy's cleats. Look at that guy's jersey. Like, those little things are a big part of what draws kids into play. And so I got to give Rob credit for that. It was annoyingly easy, but that does not mean that it's annoyingly easy to win games. Yeah. There's a lot of guys who think they can come out and play 11-a-side in the CSL. They don't realize how good the CSL is. Yeah. And they don't realize the standard, and that the CSL doesn't just draw from New York City. It draws from like a whole host of nations, and that makes it a lot tougher. But I think we've made a decent stab at it so far.
And talking about the CSL as a whole, it's celebrating its 100th year. What do you think it adds to New York City just as a community overall?
It adds so much. It adds a culture. It adds a community, because you can be on the field with a guy who's from Nigeria, you can be on the field with a guy who's from Mexico, and a guy who's from Norway. I'm not even joking. You've got all this melding of cultures together. And that, I know it sounds trite and it's been said so many times about this city, but that's what it is. We can go to a Cambodian restaurant if we want to. There's no other place in the world. Tonight, we can go where we want and imbibe all these different cultures. And to have that all together on the field is amazing. And it gives color, it gives spectacle, it gives life to the city. And you go to Randall's Island on a Sunday and you see all these different teams playing, you think that is pretty special. That's very special.
I wanted to now switch to asking you about your podcast, Caught Offside.
Yes.
Amazing podcast. And I have to say, I'm fanboying having you here.
No,
and I hope you're going to give me some notes on my job as an interview afterwards.
No, you're doing great. You don't need notes from me.
Thank you.
No.
All right. I'll take that as a compliment so far. But how did you get that started?
It was one of those things, again, in New York, having connections. It was a friend of a friend. I was looking for work. I wanted to pivot into more audio-based stuff, away from writing. And a guy knew somebody who was basically looking to hire at ESPN New York at 98.7. The World Cup was coming up in 2014. The commitment to soccer was, we'll give it a podcast. We're not going to give it a live on-air show. And we said, that's fine. So we did a year. Things were good. The numbers were decent.
So for ESPN, you were effectively like the spearhead of their World Cup coverage for 2014.
For ESPN New York,
okay.
for 98.7 in the city. I mean, obviously ESPN itself had the coverage. So up in Bristol, the TV guys were doing their thing. They don't like to. They look at us radio people as trolls, and they, stay away from them. We're unclean. But yeah, we were down in New York and we were doing our thing. And our first interview was Hope Solo. And you're like, okay, this is pretty good. And we built a fan base, we built a bit of a following, then we got added to the ESPN FC feeds on Apple and on Spotify, and things blew up from there. And it was an amazing 8 years with them, a really great 8 years, and now we're on our own.
Is your audience mainly focused in America? How much are you reaching sort of global?
It's amazing how many we've kept globally. So obviously it's mostly the US and Canada because of ESPN's brand. That's where we were situated. But like we had listeners in Norway. There was Breidablik, the Icelandic soccer team. They had their youth players listen to us on the coach going to games. So that was weird. One of them contacted us, and I thought, wow, that's amazing. So we still got listeners in Australia. Pretty strong listenership in Australia. Don't know if we still have that one girl in Norway who was listening to us, but I hope she still is. And we have a couple of listeners, Bangladesh, different places, but mostly the United States and Canada, especially probably since we went independent, I would think.
You must interact with so many different corners of American soccer through the podcast. You interact with so many different corners of soccer, through your work in grassroots. How have you seen the game change here, even in the 8 years you've lived in America?
I mean, the change since I first came out in 2008 and then this period that I've been here permanently has been massive, enormous. I think the game, for me, it's the biggest sport in America. Like the NFL hogs the media and it hogs your Sunday and your television. But you go to Long Island, you go to New Jersey, you go to Connecticut, those fields are full Saturday and Sunday, and they're not full of NFL players, and they're not full of lacrosse players. Well, sometimes lacrosse, but mostly soccer. Soccer is huge, and it has its own culture here. For so long, I would say the biggest thing I've seen, for so long it was like, how do we make this English? Or how do we make it Scottish or Irish or French or Italian or Spanish? No, right now it's been made American in its own way. It's American in its own way, for good and sometimes for bad, but it's certainly its own culture, and a lot of people are quite proud of that.
I personally feel like with the American culture, like maybe it's like this in every aspect of life, but they borrowed lots of different parts of lots of different cultures because they made up a lot of different cultures, and it creates these incredible combinations. Like we even see that in the CSL field where. And most of the time you get the best of whatever Europe, best of South America, and then you get this really cool American spin. And there's nowhere else in the world where you could really have that.
No, and what we're lucky to have here is like we can sit down and we can watch. I know there's paywalls, that's not great, but there seems to be a smorgasbord. Like there's people who love the Bundesliga here and will talk your ears off about Bayern Munich and Dortmund and St. Pauli and all these teams, and then there's people who are like watching the Premier League, and it all comes into America and kind of is just mixed together. So it's not like, look at Liga MX, look how popular it is here. There's a whole subculture of US-based Liga MX fans. I mean, the numbers that league does up here is unbelievable. So yeah, we kind of get a bit of everything. We're lucky. It's a burrito filled with all different footballing cultures.
Finally. Yeah. What do you think is the one thing that American soccer could do better that would maybe propel them to win a World Cup in, let's say, 20, 30 years? What's the one thing they need to do better?
I mean, it's an old chestnut, but the idea that a love of the game, a pair of boots and a football is not enough, that you have to pay these exorbitant youth soccer fees to play. They're wild. And I saw it, I was part of the problem. I was a coach, and now I did not see all of this money, but it was $150 an hour to have me on the field. Now, come on. Like that's a crazy imposition. And then you see the fees, $1,500 is the lower end in some states for a travel soccer team for 3 months. That's not good enough. Per player, come on. We have to do better than that. We have to be able to open it out. And in opening it out, you allow the socio-economic demographics that fuel the NFL, that fuel the NBA, fuel soccer too. It can't be all, suburban white kids. It can't be that way. And I do think US soccer is making great strides to open it out to other lower income people. And that's important. It's got to be for everyone or it's for no one.
JJ, really appreciate you giving the time, your insight on so many. You have so many different perspectives on soccer, which is so. It's
you
really
can just say I talk a lot. That's all.
You talk a lot as well, in a very nice Irish accent. But really appreciate your time. And I think, are you playing with the Yoa over 40s now?
I am. I was once upon a time, so you were allowed to have 3 players under whatever age. So I was once upon a time the player that was under the age for the 35s and all that. But now I am old. I turned 40 last year, and I'm feeling it.
Well, we're going to see you feeling it this Sunday. We're going to be streaming you, so stretch out the hamstrings.
Oh my God!
Whatever, the back, all that stuff.
I'm getting an injection in my knee tomorrow, so okay. All the best with that one.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks very much for your time, JJ.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.